Welcome everybody to Repat Armenia live talks. I hope everyone is safe and healthy. My name is Raffi Kassarjian, and I've been the chairman of Repat Armenia for the last 8 years since founding. And I'm also CEO of Sensyan, a new advisory firm that was founded in February. Very excited to have with me tonight Shombi Sharp, who is the resident coordinator of the United Nations mission in Armenia. That means he's essentially the head of the United Nations mission in Armenia. And what we're hoping to do for the next hour or so is talk a little bit about Shombi and his background, talk about some of the work that the UN is doing in Armenia, especially with what's going on with COVID-19 and the pandemic. But also hope get a little bit into more sort of the personal backgrounds, and obviously most importantly take questions from everybody in the audience. I should mention that I moved to Armenia with my family in 2008, one of the best decisions of my life. You can see from my background a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge. For a number of personal professional reasons, we've been in the US for the last few months, and then this pandemic kind of caught us off guard, but we are planning to be back in Yerevan full-time in June, and very much looking forward to that. So with that, welcome Shombi. And I thought I would start as a way of you sort of introducing yourself. How does one decide to join the United Nations, and how did you make that decision, and how's it been so far?
Thank you, Raffi, and let me just first say Barav Zes to everybody, and greetings from Yerevan. I think, and I'm pleased to see that we're both within the prescribed uniform for the evening.
Exactly.
I have to, let me just first of all say I think Repat in general is a great organization, and I know, of course, I've known you pretty much since I arrived, you and Lucine, your better half, and Rima and the other colleagues. So it's a fantastic organization, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. I was inspired by my friend David Beckett. I saw him as well on one of these recently, and I thought, wow, if I can possibly ever have a chance to do the same, it would be great. So here we are. I think, why to join the UN? In hindsight, in a way, it was, for me personally, it was, in the end, it was a natural decision. I was always growing up, I was very interested in languages and cultures and traveling. And I remember I was fortunate enough to travel with my family, do some international trips and various points growing up. And I always felt a little bit of I really loved it, but I felt something missing. I didn't want to be just a tourist, I wanted to really live in places and sort of become part of them. But I never really translated that into a career choice early on. So I started in advertising straight out of university. I did a business degree undergraduate, and advertising was a great option. It was fantastic. I loved it. It was wonderful, especially for a young guy, very exciting, and you get free tickets to all the sporting events and concerts and such. But at a certain point in time, I started to look around, and it's a great occupation, perfect, I'm sure, for many people. But I realized for myself, I wouldn't really be fulfilled, looking 20 years in the future, this sort of thing, looking around. I just thought I need a bit something different. And
but hold on, you do look like a character out of Mad Men. You realize that, right? So I think you could have continued in that path very successfully as well, I'm sure. Sorry, go ahead.
No, well, thank you very much. And actually, when Mad Men, it's a funny you mentioned that when Mad Men first came out, I hadn't seen the show, and people kept telling me, you look like this guy from this show Mad Men. And I thought, at a certain point, I said to my wife Sarah, I said, we got to watch this show. So we put it on, and of course, immediately here comes John Hamm, and halfway through the show, I'm thinking, I really don't think I look like him, but if people think so, that's fantastic, because the guy's a stud. Then his boss, the old guy with gray hair, came on, and I realized, oh, they were talking about him. Oh well. Anyway, he has a really good sense of humor. So about this point in time, I actually, speaking of my wife Sarah, we were dating very seriously, and she had returned from the US Peace Corps. And somehow I'd never heard of this thing called international development. And I started to realize, wow, this is what I want. This kind of combines a sort of sense of really kind of redeeming work that I was after, I felt was redeeming, and the international side of things. So we decided, my to-be wife and I decided to get married, and I would quit my career. We would move to Africa for a kind of an extended honeymoon for a year, and give it a try. And I'll never forget that phone call to my father. You know, literally, I feel so bad now in retrospect. One phone call, "Hi, Dad. Yeah, listen, here's the thing. I'm quitting my promising career in advertising. I'm getting married, and I'm moving to Africa." You know, and of course, thought I was crazy. Sort of said, "Who is this woman? You know, that's making you lose your mind?" But we did that, and I worked with Care International for a year in Africa as a volunteer. Actually, it was a kind of extended honeymoon. They hired me on. 3 more years later, I realized I needed a graduate degree, and even in the NGO sector to kind of continue my evolution. Went back to grad school. I did a graduate degree in economics, and then I was hired straight away. In fact, even before I graduated, by the UN. So I've never looked back. I think it was the best decision I've ever made, but it was definitely the hardest decision. I mean, to leave what was a pretty good kind of career path was really, really tough. And one thing that sometimes when I'm speaking to schools, kids at schools, students, this sort of thing, it sounds like a total cliche, but it is so very true, and something my mother was always drilling into me throughout my life, which is do what you love to do, because you will be successful and great at it no matter what. But if you force yourself in a direction that you don't feel comfortable, you're not going to reach your potential. And that's really where I found myself. For one reason or another, advertising just wasn't my kind of lifelong goal. And I switched, and that was really the best thing I think I ever did.
That's great. So, I mean, you think about this, the UN, a huge organization, obviously, the kind of quintessential multinational organization, built out of the ruins of World War II to prevent sort of similar conflicts and to take place. How do you balance sort of being able to get work done when you're part of such a large organization?
Sure. Well, first of all, I would say I mean, there's no getting around it. The UN is a very large organization. And one thing that I quite often deal with is that, really the UN, in a way, you shouldn't really think of it as one single organization. It's kind of a constellation of different parts and this sort of thing. So on the one hand, you have obviously the political side and the Security Council and these sorts of things. And I won't go. I'll spare you all the details. But you do have the global body, the General Assembly, the legislative body, and doing really, really important work. On the other hand, the other kind of universe is the development and humanitarian side. And so these are organizations on the ground, delivering quite often, very tangible supports to countries, to peoples, to communities. And that's very much the part of the UN world that I live in. So it's really no more, in that sense, bureaucratic, I think, than any organization engaged in the field of development and humanitarian work. In fact, I mean, I've had the experience working in the civil society sector, working in business sector, this sort of thing, and in fact, really, it's not that big bureaucratic thing that one thinks about when you think of the big UN Security Council and such. And in fact, our partners are routinely undertaking sort of assessments. Our donor development partners, UK, others, they check on us and they hold us accountable, and they look at and see how sort of effective and efficient are we, and generally speaking, the UN, comes out very, very well. So sometimes people do have this imagination of the UN being sort of very slow, very bureaucratic, maybe inefficient, this sort of thing. I'm not saying there aren't parts of it, maybe the house that are, but when it comes to really the development humanitarian side, I think that's not the case at all.
So if we and just kind of along that line, if we think about what's going on with COVID-19, I mean, you have this phenomenon where it's truly a global phenomenon, right? I mean, I think all countries realize how interconnected we really are for something that started in one part of the world to truly reach essentially every country around the globe. At the same time, not only most sort of federal governments, but even state governments like here in the US right now, understand that this is a very local problem. So you have this global pandemic that requires, in many ways, a coordinated response, which is exactly what something like the UN, the World Health Organization, and all these institutions that are, that span across multiple countries and have, whose staff come from all over the world, having to deal with. At the same time, you have countries having to take very, very sort of localized responses to be able to deal with this. What do you think the role is of the UN and the sister organization, or the sort of the umbrella under which the UN operates during this time? What is the UN doing? What do you think the UN should be doing? And then maybe we can talk a little bit more about what Armenia should be doing.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean. Absolutely, this is the definition of a global crisis for sure, and I think that it just reinforces, I guess, 2 points. One is that we absolutely need to, rather than there's been a lot of criticism, for example, targeted at WHO in particular. But I think this is the time to strengthen the multilateral capacities to recognize a threat when it arises, to prepare, in fact, before the threat arises, to prepare. We do all kinds of work. WHO does a lot of work with governments and in terms of preparing resilience and response plans. But this is the time to strengthen and to invest in a more robust multilateral system, absolutely, rather than the opposite. At the same time, as is always the case, of course, ultimately the onus, the mandate, the responsibility for an effective response lies with governments, national governments, local governments, member states when it comes to the work of the UN. So the UN is always either capacitated or empowered or limited by the degree to which the member states dictate in a way. So we really need both. We need really robust multilateral coordination systems. I think the UN the WHO, in fact, actually has been doing a fantastic job. Not everybody agrees. There's a lot of misinformation, let's say, going around there. But it's not to say they don't make any mistakes. Of course they do. It's also not to say that that WHO and that science, in broadly speaking, has had all the answers in this particular pandemic. It's a very much a learning process, and WHO and the UN has been adjusting and changing guidance and advice based on the evidence. So, for example, you were mentioning Armenia. We have, in fact, right now a WHO virtual mission. So they couldn't actually come physically, but we have a virtual mission in town here now, working with the government. WHO has been working with the government. The UN, we've been working with the government throughout for these months, assessing the hospital capacities, laboratory capacities, looking at protocols. We've been helping with providing additional test kits, PPE materials, masks, gowns, all of these things. So we have a mission now working with the government to understand the new thinking, the new understanding of the balance between the medical imperative and the sort of socioeconomic livelihood imperative. And I think in any case, these sort of more aggressive responses, lockdowns and such, were never intended to last forever. Obviously, it's impossible. So, it's a bit the hammer and the dance type of approach. What we've learned is that the more assertive and the faster responses earlier in the epidemic, the better your chances are to flatten the curve and then to be able to relax restrictions sooner. But those countries which were slower in taking actions up front then face much more difficult challenges after. So we're working right now with the Armenian government to understand where is that right balance. I would say the government here was quite good in terms of taking quick action. Schools were closed almost immediately with the introduction of locally confirmed cases, and a number of other restrictive measures were taken. I give government here very high marks, the Prime Minister, Minister of Health, very high marks in terms of transparency. They really said from the very beginning, already at that time, there were lots of questions about some countries. Their numbers just didn't look right, didn't pass the sniff test, so to speak. Here in Armenia, the government said, look, we are going to be absolutely transparent. I mean, with all of the data. And sure enough, especially early on in this first few cases, the Prime Minister was coming on at whatever time of the night the case was revealed, and presenting that information to the public. And that transparency has carried forward. So a lot of areas, room for discussion, debate about understanding the appropriate responses, because there simply are no answers. But the authenticity in terms of transparency, I think, has been really good here.
That's great. Do you speak with your colleagues in other member states to try to share kind of best practices on how to deal with things, and then hopefully some of that makes that back in terms of your recommendations to the Armenian government?
Yes, absolutely, definitely. This is part of, and in fact, the virtual mission that's working right now with government is sharing the kind of latest best or good practices, let's say. We're looking, of course, mostly at regional experiences or those countries that share somewhat similar profiles. As we've seen, one of the difficulties with responding to this particular and to COVID-19 is that there are so many variables. People talk about a certain fatality, death rate, or something like that. But there simply is no single constant in this regard. It depends on so many variables. It depends on, obviously, spread factor, the RO factor. How quickly will COVID spread? Will coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2 spread? A lot of that depends on cultural factors. It depends on how our populations mixing. Then in terms of, the caseload, how does that translate then into fatalities and a death rate? A lot of that depends on the demography of the country. I mean, the age, sort of composition there, the amount of vulnerable population, how many people do you have, elderly people with comorbidities, underlying conditions, things like that. And then, of course, how prepared is the healthcare system to absorb the cases that come? Because, as we've seen, if you have a fortuitous demographic profile in a country, if you have a strong healthcare system, then you can absorb a reasonably high level of epidemic spread with a relatively low fatality rate, death rate, and with the vast majority of cases sort of asymptomatic or mild. But if you have an unfavorable combination of those, it can be an absolute disaster. So there's just simply no one size fits all, and that's really where we're working with the government here to understand.
Very good. So I'd like to ask our audience if you have any questions related to the current situation and how the UN's involved, please go ahead and post your questions under the event so that we can pose them to Shombi. I'd like to move on to a couple of other topics. First, Shombi, maybe I know you had a very interesting route in terms of the countries that you've served in with the UN. Maybe you can kind of walk us through that chronology a little bit, and then we can talk about what are some of the things that are the same or different as you've been in these different postings.
Sure, absolutely. No, it's been a fantastic journey. Before I joined the UN, I had as I was mentioning, I worked with Care International in Zimbabwe, so that was my first sort of overseas experience. Wonderful. That was actually before the very challenging difficulties that they had. So I don't want to age myself, and but basically this is sort of 99, 2000. Then after that, I've been very, very lucky. I feel in terms of my postings. I've served in New York first, and then in Moscow, and then New York again, and then Moscow again, then Beirut, which I know has a special place in your heart, Raffi, and then finally here in Yerevan. And I like to say that I am. It's finally, I finally understand that I am ABC. So as we say in the parlance, the Armenian by choice, which of course, because I selected this post, I put in for it. But only once I arrived here, I suddenly realized, wow, I put connected all of the dots, and realized that actually my whole life's trajectory, career-wise, has been, leading towards this outcome from the day I was, if I can get a little bit personal here, the day I was born in St. Joseph's Hospital in Burbank, California, which, as you know, is kind of right next to Glendale, serves a lot of Armenian population. In fact, never in my life did I meet somebody born in that same hospital until I moved to Yerevan, and I've met a bunch of here. And then the one constant from Moscow, New York, Tbilisi, Beirut here has been great exposure to Armenian diaspora. Some of my best friends in many of these places actually are Armenian diaspora. So that's really been I've been fortuitous in terms of having exciting places to be in, lots of different experiences, different languages. I learned Russian fluently in my years in Moscow. I started to learn Arabic, bas Arabic dir sab, mishma'u yani. So I gave it up at a certain point, and my Armenian is pretty limited, but I still have ambitious goals to get there at some point. I've got lots of funny stories and such that I can share, but I don't know what's interesting to the audience.
Well, actually, maybe you could talk about some things. I don't know, some particular story, something that most surprised you, or something that's most memorable from these. Not every posting, but things that are particularly interesting.
Well, okay, and I mean, I'm not trying to pander to you or to the viewership, but by far and away the most amazing experience I ever had so far in my career, and I'm pretty sure probably will ever have, was the Velvet Revolution. I arrived. It was quite amazing. I felt bad for my predecessor. Bradley Bussetto, whom you know. He was here for 5 years and then left a matter of weeks before I arrived in March of 2018. Sort of had about 1 month to get a lay of the land, so to speak. And then, as we all know, everything just completely changed overnight. And that was quite amazing. I mean, I didn't know much about the country. I had just arrived. I was actually new in this position as resident coordinator, sort of UN ambassador. In charge, designated, official for security. So in charge of some 300 staff, the safety and well-being of 300 staff. And all of a sudden we're in the middle of this revolution. And it was all our UN house is just off of Republic Square. So as you know, I mean, everything was taking place there. And we had at certain points in time, 100,000 people gathering literally less than a block. The windows were open. I could hear the speeches riding cables to New York. And And, everything was happening around the office. We would hear rumors, tanks are coming in, or, this and that. And I would just take my security guys and say, look, let's just go out and see, because it's right there. We'd go out to the street and see what's happening. The fact that the fact that the revolution happened, and then it happened peacefully, and that it resulted in a peaceful outcome, which, it was a minute by minute, hour by hour, uncertain situation, was really something incredible. I mean, really, really amazing. So that experience, I think is definitely something I'll never forget. I know that wasn't the point of the question, but that's really the honest answer. I've had so many experiences, and what I really appreciated, but Beirut, one of the best postings I could have in the world. I mean, 97% of the time, probably the best place. The history, the culture, the sea, the food, the people, unbelievable. The pace of life, unbelievable. And then 3% of the time, all of a sudden, a car bomb goes off a block away, or some guys are, shooting AK-47s or something around the block, and you're hunkering in your apartment. And I'm thinking, maybe this was the worst idea ever. This is what people always warned me about. But then it would just pass. And, a day later, back to the amazing life there. So, just really, really enjoyed. And of course, the Armenian community, there was amazing. My best Lebanese friend actually is Armenian doctor, Armenian Lebanese doctor. My favorite restaurant, and I'm not joking, in all of Lebanon was Mairig. So when I heard that the Mairig was opening in Yerevan, I just thought amazing, fantastic. I'll be the very first customer there. But lots of experiences, and don't really know where to start, where to end. I had in Georgia, one of my probably the most interesting project I was involved with there was you have, of course, the sort of breakaway unrecognized territory there of Abkhazia. There's a river called the Nguri River, which is the divide between Georgia, Abkhazia, this sort of thing, and there's a bridge across it. So it's literally and figuratively a bridge across the conflict divide. And I was basically instrumental. It was one of my top priorities to negotiate. This bridge had been war damaged. It hadn't been repaired in 20 years. And it was a humanitarian disaster because every day, 800, 900 people would cross the bridge, mainly elderly people, children going to school. And literally it filled with water. You needed a 4-wheel drive to cross the bridge. So I eventually managed to broker a project to negotiate on both sides to essentially refurbish the whole bridge. This was a massive undertaking, and basically changed the lives of almost 1,000 people every single day crossing that. And the symbolism, I think, was quite powerful too. But lots of other stories. If
maybe this is the time, Shombi, for Rima to read some of the questions or comments from our audience. Rima, I'll turn it over to you. Oh, are you on mute, Rima? Let's see. Okay, well, you know what? We'll do that a little bit later once we get the technical difficulties worked out. So, Shombi, I think, I'm not sure, but I think you've had, your postings have been essentially one after the other. So you and your family have been living essentially outside of the United States for most.
Yes, I am here. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, let me just. Can you hear me?
Yes. It looks like you can hear the background of the live too. So
one Raffi is enough, I think.
Yes.
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go
Okay, so you will see. Let me just. Can you hear me?
Rima, can you turn off?
Can you hear me?
Can you turn off the sound of the live stream?
Okay, let me just turn it off and then come back to you. Okay, sorry.
Okay, we haven't got this perfect yet. We're almost there.
I know. I'm sure this is probably the first Zoom call you've been on, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Nice one. You too. You too. We're both wearing our Zoom shirts, right?
Yeah, I just keep it on the back of the chair, and I'm in pajamas, the bottom half, and it's quite a nice routine.
Okay, why don't until Rima comes on, the question I was going to ask, which you can either answer now or later, is you and your family have moved around all these postings over the last almost 20 years now, right? How has it been raising American kids outside of America for essentially all of their lives?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question, and I think it's something that my perspective on that has evolved with time. I think that basically kids, or at least every kid is different. Every child has their personality and ability, let's say, to be flexible and to move frequently, live this sort of international life. If you had asked me this question before my kids, I have a son, Avery. He's 20. He's at the American University of Paris now, second year student. He actually did his first year here at American University of Armenia. That was our deal. Come do one year here at AUA. When we found out that AUA has the kind of accreditation with the California school system, we thought that'd be great, so we could sort of learn about the country and not just be a foreigner when he comes back to visit. And then my daughter is a senior in high school here at the QSI International School. She's getting ready to go to university next fall, and just a little plug for her, Annika. She just got into accepted Brown University, so she'll be there in
Congratulations.
We're very pleased for her. Of course, whenever she has a very, very sensitive spot about any mention of distance learning. So if I ever want to rile her up, I just simply say, baby, don't worry, you've got your spot in our living room for distance learning next semester. The thought of starting college in our living room for her is horrifying. So the president of Brown actually just published an op-ed, I think in the New York Times, maybe yesterday, talking about how universities need to reopen in the fall. So I guess that's a pretty good signal that Brown will be physically open. We'll see. But if you had asked me before they were in high school, teenagers, I would have said it's a dream, it's a breeze. Kids are so resilient, they're so adaptable. It was all upside. This amazing lifestyle of traveling, learning languages and cultures, and really being a kind of a world citizen, having an open mind, really a worldly perspective. It was all good. I have to admit, once the kids get to the kind of mid-teenage, high school years, then you realize, okay, this is tough. When friends become, in a way, we have to admit, more important than the parents, it happens to all of us. This is tough to be moving frequently. We got lucky. My son Avery, he actually spent all 4 years in the same high school in Tbilisi in Georgia. Annika was a bit unlucky; she had to move midway through. But I still think, on balance, I have really appreciated. I really think, and we have conversations with the children about this, and I think that they really agree that they're very happy to have had the opportunity to grow up internationally. They have almost not lived in the U.S. When we think about it, my son was born in Zimbabwe, actually, and my daughter was 6 months old, maybe, when we moved to Russia. I think they've lived a total of a couple of years, their entire lives, in the U.S. It's kind of funny because when we do go back to the U.S., every couple of years for sort of home visits, see the family, this kind of thing, and I'm almost, they look just like Americans, right? So you would have no idea, but then I think almost in the way that in the Second World War. Let's say like German spies, they were perfect. They had the accent down. They had this encyclopedic knowledge of things, but there were certain, cultural sort of gaps that they hadn't covered. So I think it was, that for the Americans, the trick would always be to ask somebody presenting themselves. So who won the 1940, World Series or something? And that's the one bit of trivia that the German spy wouldn't know. So our kids are a little bit like that, I remember when I took my son to a baseball game, Kansas City Royals. I was born in Burbank, but grew up in Kansas City. At a certain point, he asked me, "So Dad, how many times does the ball have to bounce before it's a home run?" Oh my God. Seriously. I mean, this just exposed, these small little comments expose gaps. One time my wife Sarah was taking them into sort of a public swimming pool, and walking in, the kids said something. It was clear, maybe they had a slight accent, sort of like from a different state. This was in Kansas City, so the lady said, "Oh, where are you kids from?" Meaning like, "Are you from Mississippi or something?" And the kids just responded, "We're from America," and it's like, the lady's like, "Yeah, obviously," but they didn't know how to respond to that question in any more granular way than to say we're from America, because they never really lived in any place in the States. So, I think bottom line, there are pros, there are cons, but on the whole, we're very pleased with the decision. I think the kids really appreciate what they've been given, which is really this amazing understanding of the world. And actually, thanks to you, they're learning their American geography now. You probably don't realize this, but you and Lucina introduced us to the Ticket to Ride board game, right? So we, being quarantined and such, or isolated, we got that game, and now they're kind of like, Oklahoma City, where is that? Trying to find the spots on the board. So that's been a lot of fun.
Excellent, thank you. So I think Rima is ready now to ask a couple of questions on behalf of the audience that have been coming through.
Hello, everyone. This is Rima. Sorry if you're seeing Vartan Marashlan on your screen, but that's me. Okay, so we have David Beckett says, patiently waiting for questions from the audience.
Oh,
hey, Dave.
No questions from David Beckett. That guy's a troublemaker.
So yeah, Tina S says, good evening. What measures is UN Armenia taking for children in vulnerable families, those with an appropriate guardians?
Okay. Well, I will resist the temptation to get into too much detail, because that's definitely a question that my colleague Tanya Raduchai, head of UNICEF, and the UNICEF team should take, because they're working very, very closely on that issue. But I guess the question is, there's of course the ongoing situation here in Armenia, and then there's the situation related to COVID-19 impacts. But basically, first of all, one of the major priorities of UNICEF's assistance here in the country has been to work with the government to promote deinstitutionalization. So obviously, Armenia, many countries that emerged, sort of post-Soviet countries, although I think that is not really any longer an appropriate title, inherited a very institutionalized type of approach to situations. So you had a lot of children, first of all, placed in institutions, based quite often on very minimal, really outdated concepts of disabilities, this sort of thing, or orphans, that sort of thing. So UNICEF has been working a lot to help the state, to support state initiatives in terms of getting children into family situations or family-like situations. And now, in the context of COVID-19, UNICEF has and the UN in general. I should have mentioned we have we are supporting a coordination platform. We have 6 different sectors where different UN agencies are helping to coordinate international community support to the response. And one of those sectors, one is education, UNICEF, one is social protection. So we are looking at ways to really to support and increase direct cash payments and other means of support to families, vulnerable families who are most vulnerable to the impacts of COVID. And that very much includes families with children, which is there's a very direct correlation between poverty levels and the number of children in the family. So there's really, there's a lot being done in that space.
Great. We have another comment. Lilia says, I don't think that it was 100% transparency. Maybe it's about the government response. We have Sarah saying, don't forget Georgia. Shombi, don't forget Georgia. Yeah, we have a question from Vartan. Would be interesting to hear about potential impact of COVID-19 on migration, remittances, return processes during the next 2-3 years. And he has the second question. Having a strong diaspora is a great asset, especially during such global crisis, but their resources are limited. What would be 3 major areas that, from your point of view, Armenian diaspora should spend most of their efforts supporting Armenia?
Okay, thank you. Don't forget Georgia. Yes, I mean, absolutely, I wouldn't. And in fact, I mean, this is among friends. So when I was leaving from Tbilisi to Yerevan, you know, of course, I was always joking in both capitals with friends that, you know, if I have any diplomatic skills, I definitely will need to bring them to bear to the what I consider almost sort of sibling rivalry, right, between Armenia and Georgia, 2 countries so close in so many ways, like siblings, that you know, of course, certain things become competitive. It's only natural, and I've had wonderful experiences in both countries for sure, absolutely. So in terms of well, first of all, remittances, returns, I mean, migration. This is a really important area for sure. The UN is focusing a lot of efforts, in particular IOM, International Organization for Migration, and UNHCR, High Commissioner for Refugees, are working very much in this space. We're doing a lot I mean, we do a lot anyway, working with the Migration Service, working with High Commissioner for Diaspora, Sensyan, a good friend and partner, to support returns, to support the whole panoply. And we shouldn't put people into categories, but you have labor migrants, you have repats, you have refugees, you have asylum seekers, you have people, what we call people in refugee-like situations, which are largely, for example, Armenian Syrians, or people who are coming to Armenia, who may have an Armenian passport, so they don't meet the classical definition of refugee, but still need a lot of support to be able to integrate into the country. So in any case, we're working very closely with government on providing more support to people to return to Armenia, to integrate, to have opportunities for livelihoods, for jobs, this sort of thing. And this is a key aspect of addressing poverty in especially certain regions, especially in the north, Shirak and Lori and Tavush, places that see a lot of outward migration. Now, the situation, we actually see that because of COVID, in a way, I mean, I don't want to call it a silver lining or something, but you have a lot of people have come home, in a way, so to speak. So now is the time really to redouble efforts to help these people stay and to help these people have a viable livelihood and a viable future here. And so that's really where we're orienting our efforts. It's going to be tough. Obviously Armenia communities, households and communities rely a lot on remittances. And with what's happening in the global economy, especially in the countries where most of the remittances are coming from, Russia, for example, is one of the biggest, being really hammered at the moment by not just the COVID generally speaking, but the price of oil. Remittances are definitely going to be squeezed. But basically just to say that we're working with all of the government partners to do everything possible. And this includes some of those 15 elements of the 15 packages of the government program for COVID response to help support people who are coming back and help them to build a life here. Diaspora, speaking more generally, how could they engage in the COVID response? Here again, we work very closely with Zare, with the High Commissioner for Diaspora. We are ourselves engaging with diaspora in various ways. For example, we are helping to organize, and we're definitely not the only ones, have no monopoly here, but helping to organize knowledge and expertise transfer from the diaspora medical community. So we've organized some interactions between diaspora. I mean, obviously, Armenian diaspora has amazing resources in terms of medical resources, doctors and epidemiologists all over the world. So we've helped to connect them with some of the Armenian authorities here. We've helped to, and we always, first thing we need to say is that the wealth of the diaspora is not the money, it's the human resources, the knowledge, the experience. And we've seen this before COVID in terms of really rejuvenating certain sectors here in Armenia, the high-tech sector, the wine sector. And I know, Raffi, you're interested in both high-tech and wine. I don't know about high-tech wine if you've gotten into that yet. But we are working, again, through the High Commissioner with different diaspora communities to provide urgent emergency medical needs. For example, World Food Program has worked together with AGBU, with Ismailian Foundation, My Step Foundation also, and some other diaspora organizations to procure a large amount of PPEs, of masks, of gowns, of reagents for tests, of different types of equipment, and are working with government to ship those here to the country as well. So, there are so many ways that diaspora has been supporting Armenia for quite some time. And I think what we've seen is that in the past couple of years, I mean, with what's happened, with the change that's happened here, and again, I'm relatively new. I'm the least informed in the room, so to speak, on these matters. But I've seen so many indications of a new quality of a resurgence of diaspora engagement here in Armenia. I know I've met so many diasporans who are moving back here, or if not moving back here, investing, getting apartments, really saying, look, this is the time. I've wanted to do this for we've talked about this for 10 years, for 20 years. Now is the time to come back to Armenia. And in so many different ways, business investments, just getting their own place here, supporting, again, all of the different growth opportunities. So it's impossible to kind of put it into three elements, let's say. I'll just leave it like that.
Shombi, if and when you decide to leave the UN, we definitely have a position for you at Repat Armenia. I think you said it better than any of us could, so thanks for that.
Merci, Shat.
Okay, there is another very important question from David Beckett. So first off, thank you for being in Armenia, and Sarah Watterson. You guys are great. As arguably one of the most physically fit UN resident directors to ever serve in Armenia, Bradley isn't watching, so this is a safe claim. How do you stay fit during COVID-19, and are you at all worried you may lose a step in your basketball and tennis game?
Yeah, I could have anticipated such a question. David's just jealous that, you know, even despite the fact I'm a few years older than he is, I'm in better shape, generally speaking. So, no, thanks, David, for the question. Actually, it's a very good question. It's a question I asked to him. You know, for all of us, I mean, our routines have just been completely knocked out of disjointed. Where it's kind of surreal, and what you do, and we all know about the important link between the kind of physical and mental health and that sort of thing. And, you know, it depends on the personal situation. Unlike David, I have the happy situation not to have small children in the house, just the one teenager, as I mentioned. So it's quite easy for me to keep a routine, do some, whatever I can do in the house every day, doing some, speaking of Sarah, David mentioned Sarah Watterson, so
Hey, Sarah, John, it's so nice to see you.
Hi, Raffi.
She had promised to come in a long time ago. So, but I think just daily routine, stuff you can do in the house, push-ups, you know, I have a stationary cycle. I know, Raffi, you're going out on your real bicycle. I don't have one of those, but, you know, every day doing something is quite important. And all I got to say is, David, I'm looking forward to seeing you back on the basketball court very, very soon.
Okay, our next question is Nanor Balabanyan. Hi, Sarahjan. So Nanor Balabanyan asks, is the UN hiring currently, especially to work with families affected with COVID, or any other jobs in relief, education, development? Would love to move and work in Armenia, but looking for opportunities during COVID, which seem to be diminishing.
Okay. Thanks for that. I mean, we are always hiring. So I'm always telling people, I mean, I know it sounds a little bit like a brush off to say, look at the website, but it really is true. I mean, almost every day there's a different posting there on our UN website with a new job offer. Again, we have 12 different resident UN agencies, 300 staff in total. So there are a lot of opportunities there. And I mean, of course, it depends on what your, you know, what your career path is, your skills and this sort of thing. But I think there's really, you know, this is the time I applaud for diaspora to be looking, you know, now, okay, COVID, again, this threw a wrench in everybody's plans for sure. But I think that once we get through this, then Armenia will remain to be what it was before COVID, which is an amazing place of new opportunity, of resurgence and growth and optimism, and an exciting place to be, especially for diaspora. I mean, I mentioned the ABC, but I've really gotten a sense of the excitement. There's so many things happening, and not just in the kind of cultural sector, the restaurants and wine bars, the wine industry, great diaspora. Speaking of diaspora, people and investments, you know, Vahe Kushkarian, another good friend, and there's so many people making a difference here. So if you want to be in a place, it's not a large country. It's a place where you can really make a difference. I would absolutely support that idea. Let's get through this. Okay, the COVID response. You know, this is a bit of a we have to take it day by day, but this won't be with us forever in the present manifestation. And I think we'll see a return to the real excitement that we saw just a few months ago, pretty soon. And I should add, since Sarah has joined, I should add that these are Sarah's paintings here in the background.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I've
Excellent.
been spending most of my life these past few months sitting in front of this desk doing Zoom, you know, meetings right here. So I thought I wanted to have something inspirational and colorful in the background.
Very cool. So Shombi, we're coming up, the hour's almost done. It went very quickly. Now, one of your conditions for joining us today was that, you asked if you could get to ask me a question. So as a good host, I'm going to make sure that I honor the commitment the Repat made to you. So I'll turn it around.
Okay, well, I thought I might start with a very thank you very much. And in fact, I have to admit, when I was first contacted, I thought we were both going to be sort of interviewed, and then only later I realized, oh, you're doing the grilling. So I insisted to have at least the chance for a few questions. I thought I'd start with a very, very simple one. This is kind of a softball for you, Raffi. Which is better, Californian or Armenian wine?
Okay, I'm going to answer this. You're going to hear this is actually true. It's funny you mentioned that. And this is not prepared, by the way, for the audience.
No.
So as I mentioned, we've been living in California for the past few months. And I'm originally from California, so sort of grew up on California wine. And I've gone to the store a few times, and it's always hit and miss in terms of, especially the newer wines. You don't know as much about them, and I have to admit that I've had a lot of really good wine in California over the last few months, but some okay wine. So do you know what I did the other day? I finally gave up. I went to a website in the U.S. that ships Armenian wine in California and ordered a bunch of Zulal and Kush and Zora. So I think the answer is I prefer Armenian wine.
Oh, nice.
Wow. Okay. You handled that, I mean, like a true diplomat, but I believe the authenticity is there for sure. So okay, excellent. So I have only one other question for you, and this is sort of a yes or no answer that I'm looking for. Actually a two-part yes or no question. Is it true that you are willing to drive from San Francisco to Yerevan for a haircut, if that were theoretically possible? And secondly, did Abo give you that nice look that you have now?
Oh, Shombi, I was much nicer to you than you're being to me. So the answer is not Yerevan, but the answer is yes, I have driven to Los Angeles to go to Abo to get my haircut. And secondly, COVID has forced all of us into a new reality, and I'm super proud to say that my beautiful, smart wife, Lucine, was able to give me this haircut at home without having any practice before. So now, the sad part is that she asked me to cut her hair. I think she did a much better job than I think she's much more skilled than I am in this.
Can we ask Luce to come on the screen?
I think she's on. I think she's in the middle of something else right now. So so thank you for that, for the softball and not so softball.
I see that
today. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Exactly.
Oh, it's scary.
It's
very scary.
3 hours ago, Sarah cut my hair. Yeah. In fact, so and thank you for that, Raffi.
Looks great,
Sarah. In Repat Armenia, you gave me the incentive to try to kind of.
Get ready.
Get my hair cut so that I wouldn't. You don't want to see what I was looking like before. It was like the trapper coming out of the mountains after a month. So.
Guys.
Joined us for a minute. She appeared over the Golden Gate Bridge.
Oh, nice.
Okay. Rima, any more?
We have another question that I think is important one as well. So. Tina S asks, following Nanner's question to you, and referring to your enthusiasm about cooperating with Armenians of diaspora, there is this little issue that UN only hires Armenian nationals in Armenia, whereas not all expats are opted for becoming an Armenian citizen. Some already have two nationalities and can't change either.
Okay, well, if so actually I can say, I mean, I don't want to sort of pretend like it's there are just lots of opportunities, this sort of thing, but definitely there's nothing standing in the way for an Armenian person with Armenian citizenship to join the UN here, even if the person has dual citizenship, for sure. And there are basically two channels, two different ways to do that. But for example, I could even I'll invoke my good friend and colleague Babkin Der-Gregorian, who is was the former acting minister of diaspora, in fact, and many may know him from, if I'm not mistaken, he coined the phrase "electric Yerevan." But he is now actually, he joined our team last year as country economist for the UN here. He has, I lost count. I forget how many passports he has. I think it's American, French, Armenian. I'm not quite sure, but he embodies, I think, the quintessential sort of diasporan who has joined the UN system here. Absolutely. So it's certainly possible. There are definitely no roadblocks to that, but it takes a good match of the skills and the experience versus the need of the position that arises.
And we have one more question for you two, actually. So Angel Tevatrosyan asks, hello, thank you for the opportunity to listen to all of you. Just an out of subject question. Could you name a book, maybe several, that had much impact on you?
Okay, well, Raffi, as host, I think you should probably take that first.
So I have two books. The first one has more to do with kind of what I do in technology. And so I'll start with the boring one first. It's called Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore. It was a book that was written actually a long time ago, almost 30 years ago. And the key premise, and this is for all of you that are in startups, is when you're a startup, just making sure that you don't let your first big customer dictate everything that you do, that you should look beyond that first early adopter to be able to create a product that will be successful for many customers and many customer segments. It's something that I've found myself coming back to over and over again, even though it's kind of a pretty specific subject. The book that probably has had the most influence on my life, which I read when I was very young, is called Report to Greco, and it's by a Greek author, Nikos Kazantzakis, who also wrote Zorba the Greek, Freedom or Death, and basically, most of his books have been around about being Greek at the time of the Ottoman Empire and having to struggle for independence. He's from the island of Crete, actually. But in Report to Greco, it's really more of an autobiography where he goes through his struggle to understand the meaning of life across many different religions. So Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and it's just it opened my eyes at a fairly young age for me to sort of think about beyond your immediate world and the physical things and material things that are around you. Thanks for the question. Great question, by the way. Shombi, you're up.
Okay, no, absolutely great question. I don't think I'll be as eloquent as Raffi, but of course, the one that comes to mind now is Love in the Time of Cholera. But that goes back to the to the high school days, I think. But probably I would just say the most recent book that I read, Yuval Noah Harare's 21 Lessons for 21st Century. I've just started his book Sapiens, so I did it in reverse. But there, I think just obviously so many of the issues that were already kind of underway in terms of technology and changes facing society through biotech and artificial intelligence, all of these things. What's so fascinating is that that crisis. I mean, was it the crisis is spurs innovation, right? So I was actually heard it's not in the book, but heard a podcast the other day that really blew my mind. I think it was The Economist, talking about how a volcano erupted in Indonesia in the 1800s, and kind of spewed so much ash and other toxins into the air that it severely damaged the crops in Europe, led to crop failure. People were starving, started to slaughter their horses to live for food. People no longer had horses for transportation. And so a guy invented the bicycle just as a way to get around because his horse had died and this sort of thing. So necessity is the mother of invention sort of story. So I think a lot of those lessons coming through in that book. Now, what happens in crisis like COVID-19 is it turbocharges changes that were sort of already underway. And so I'm really looking forward to, we're all talking now about how will life change? Which of the changes we're experiencing today? I mean, the fact we're having this discussion on Zoom. Okay, it's an international call, so maybe that's not new, but how many of these changes in the way that we relate and work and exist as a community will go back to business as usual once the kind of the peak passes? How many will stay? How will life look a bit differently as we move forward? So a bit long-winded, but that's I think some of the points in that book were actually quite prescient now for this what we could say the post-COVID cycle once we get to it.
Actually, Shombi, since you mentioned Armenian wine, I think a book that's very interesting to read that just came out from our good friend Vahan Zanoyan is called Waking Noah's Vines. And it's about the rebirth. Actually, it's about how the winemaking originated, 6,100 or older, several thousand years ago in the area that now includes Armenia, and about the resurgence of Armenian wine over the last 10 years, which has been nothing short of a revolution of its own kind. So I think, by the way, great questions from the audience. Thank you for all of you who joined evening Yerevan time, afternoon or even morning in other parts of the world. Thank you for Repat for organizing this, and Shombi, thank you for taking time out of your TTR games to be able to talk to our Repat community. Rima, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add here, but again, this was a true pleasure on my part, and I've watched with interest some of the other ones, live streams that Repat has put together, and look forward to the next one as well.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure for us as well. Thank you and stay safe.
Well, thank you, and I just want to say it's such a pleasure to be on a show like this with somebody that really embodies the Hokov Yerita Sarder, and my other favorite Armenian phrase, and I can actually employ it today because it's true. Park asatsun aisor urpade.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Thanks again, Shombi. Thank you very much for your time. Rima, thank you for organizing.
Thank you so much.
Stay safe and healthy, everyone. And I can't wait to get back to Yerevan and see you all in person soon.
Yeah, me too.
Can't wait to see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.